In 2017, just weeks before his death, Tom Petty broke down. He told his closest friend about the day that haunted him for decades. It happened in 1979. Someone was dying and Tom walked away. He never went back. He called it the most cowardly thing he ever did. The shame followed him through every song, every tour, every relationship. He tried to numb it with drugs. Nothing worked. What he did that day will break your heart. It explains everything about why he lived the way he did. Tom Petty came into the world on October 20th, 1950 at exactly 51 p.m. in Gainesville, Florida. He was born to Kitty, a local tax office worker, and Earl, a traveling salesman who was hardly ever home. Their house sat in a quiet neighborhood called the Duck Pond, filled with old Victorian homes and mossy trees. The kind of place that looked peaceful from the outside. But inside the Petty home, things were anything but peaceful. Tom's father, Earl, had a bad temper and a drinking problem. And by the time Tom was 5 years old, the beatings had already begun. One day in 1955, while playing with a slingshot in the yard, Tom accidentally hit the fin of a shiny 1955 Cadillac. The angry driver came straight to their house. Kitty warned him in a whisper, "This is bad. Your father's not going to like this." When Earl got home that night, he took off his belt and beat his son until his body was covered in raised welts from head to toe. Kitty and Tom's grandmother laid him on the bed, stripped off his clothes, and dabbed the wounds with cotton and alcohol, while he cried in silence. It wasn't the last time. Tom learned early how to disappear when his father came near. He found comfort with his mother. Kitty was soft-spoken, kind, and full of music. She taught him country songs and always kept a radio playing nearby. But her own life was hard. She had epilepsy and cancer, and she quietly endured the storm of Earl's violent moods. One day, years later, while Tom was playing with his band, Mutt Crutch, the family went on a fishing trip. On the way back, Earl had too many drinks and crashed the car into another vehicle. Everyone was knocked unconscious. Kitty's health never recovered. She became weaker and more withdrawn after that day. And when she died on October 20, 1980, just one day after Tom's 30th birthday, Tom said he knew she was already slipping away long before that. Things shifted again when Tom was 10. It was the summer of 1961. His uncle Earl Jernigan worked in the movie business and took him to see a film shoot in Ocala. The movie was Follow That Dream, and the star was Elvis Presley. Hundreds of people crowded the streets to catch a glimpse. Then Elvis appeared glowing like some kind of god and walked right past young Tom, pausing just long enough to shake his hand. Tom stood frozen, too stunned to speak. They started playing together and formed Mutt Crutch with a few other local guys, including Benmont Tench, a classically trained keyboardist with a sharp ear. They played all over Florida, built their sound, and practiced at a beat-up farmhouse on NW 45th Avenue, called Mutt Crutch Farm. It was more than a name. It was home. By 1970, Tom was just 19 and fronting the band full-time. They recorded their first single in 1971 and started building a small following. The songs were strange and soulful, echoing the Grateful Dead more than the top 40 radio hits of Gainesville. In fall 1970, they landed a steady gig at Dub's Steer Room, a rowdy bar with topless dancers and rowdy crowds. They played 6 nights a week from 9:00 p.m. to 2:00 a.m. for $100 a week, more than some of their parents made. During the day, they worked landscaping jobs in the Florida heat for the University of Florida's grounds department. After work, they rehearsed at the farm, then played all night at Dub's. It was brutal. It was non-stop. It was the only way they could survive. In 1972, they threw a music festival at Mutt Crutch Farm. Hundreds of people showed up. The police didn't stop it. That gave them confidence to go bigger. For Halloween, they threw a second one. This time it exploded into chaos. People took drugs. Some thought they were in A Clockwork Orange. Officials stormed in, ripped out the cords, grabbed drumsticks, and shut it down. Angry fans tore down the sound towers and set them on fire. The band got evicted. Mutt Crutch was homeless again. Through it all, Tom's focus never wavered. On March 24, 1974, he married his high school girlfriend, Jane Benno. She was already pregnant with their daughter, Adria, who would be born on November 28 that same year. They lived above a barber shop and laundromat at 1618 N. Wanest Avenue, where friends crashed, smoked weed, and listened to records. Tom played his songs for Mike Campbell at the kitchen table. But the small space, the late-night noise, and Tom's single-minded obsession with music began to wear on Jane, who felt alone even when he was home. In August 1974, Tom Petty was just 23 when he left Gainesville, Florida, with nothing but a demo tape, a handful of friends, and a borrowed $100 for gas. Mudcrutch wasn't a famous band. They were just a group of Florida boys chasing a sound. They drove across the country toward Los Angeles, packed in tight with their instruments and dreams. They didn't have a plan, just a belief that the music would carry them. It nearly did. Within their first week in La, 7 record companies offered them studio time, based on that rough demo alone. But they didn't sign right away. They got a call from producer Denny Cordell, and stopped in Tulsa at Shelter Records, to cut demos for 20 straight hours, all in one go. It was hot, loud, and frantic. By spring, they were back in La. And in August 1974, Shelter signed them. At first, Shelter put the band up at the Hollywood Premier Motel. Tom remembered it like a cheap hooker joint, not exactly the rock star dream. Eventually, they moved into houses in Canoga Park, with swimming pools and no furniture. Tom said it felt royal. Anyway, we brought all the girls and dogs and everything. This was heavy, man. A house with a swimming pool. Florida had never felt this wild. The contrast between the swampy heat of Gainesville and LA's chaotic glamour was overwhelming. But it was exciting, too. Everything felt like it could happen. It didn't last. By the end of 1975, Mudcrutch fell apart. The band had 3 songwriters pulling in different directions, and they couldn't adjust to studio life. Tom stayed behind in La alone in a cheap $6 per night motel, scraping by on a Shelter publishing retainer. Then in early 1976, something unexpected happened. Benmont Tench got some studio time and invited old Gainesville friends to jam. Petty stopped by, heard the music, and knew it immediately. That was the sound. Mike Campbell on guitar, Tench on keys, Stan Lynch on drums, Ron Blair on bass. Petty joined them and they recorded Strangered in the Night just like that. He rushed the tapes to Cordell in Malibu, and things moved fast. In June 1976, they recorded 15 songs in 15 nights. Every afternoon, Tom wrote, at 9:00 p.m., the band would arrive and they'd work until sunrise. 1 song per night, no breaks. It was raw and exhausting. They called themselves Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And they had no idea what was coming. Their debut album dropped on November 9, 1976. It sold only 6,500 copies in the first 3 months. Breakdown flopped. But then early in 1977, they opened for Blondie at the Whiskey. The critics went wild. That led to a UK tour in the spring, opening for Neil Slogren, and everything exploded. American Girl and Anything That's Rock and Roll took over British radio. The crowds lost their minds. Tom remembered landing in London at 7:30 in the morning and facing a full press swarm. It never slowed down. For 2 months, they were chased across the UK. Girls stormed the stage. Security couldn't keep them back. They weren't just opening anymore. They were headlining. When they released Breakdown in late 1977, it hit, then 40 on the Billboard chart in 1978. The thing that flopped the first time was now the thing pulling them back up. In March 1979, Shelter Records got sold off to MCA. The moment it happened, Tom Petty felt betrayed. He had a clause in his contract that said he had to be consulted before anyone could sell his name to another company. But no one called him. Suddenly, MCA owned him. He said he wouldn't be bought and sold like meat. So, MCA sued him. They locked him out of recording, performing, or signing with anyone else. They tried to bury him with lawsuits, 9 of them. At the same time, Petty went into the studio and started recording anyway. He didn't ask for permission. He paid out of pocket, racking up more than $500,000 in recording costs for what would become Damn the Torpedoes. On May 23, 1979, with nowhere else to turn, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. His debts were $576,630. His assets were just $56,845. But the move voided his contracts and forced MCA to come to the table. One terrified record executive told Billboard, "If this works, every artist will try it." And it worked. Petty got to renegotiate. He kept creative control, but everything around him was falling apart. His marriage was crumbling. Jane Bino, whom he'd married in 1974, was mentally unstable and already struggling with addiction. She called constantly. Sometimes she threatened suicide if he didn't stay on the phone. Their daughter Adria saw it all. Years later, she would call her mother cruel and verbally abusive. But in 1979, Tom didn't leave. He threw himself into work instead. On October 19, 1979, Damn the Torpedoes came out. It hit number 2 on the Billboard 200. It went triple platinum. Songs like Refugee, Don't Do Me Like That, and Here Comes My Girl played everywhere. The album was raw and honest, recorded during legal chaos and emotional exhaustion. Petty later said there was a sense of persecution that year. Lawsuits, pressure, and pain surrounded every note, but it all cut through. By 1980, they had sold over 3 million albums. Bassist Ron Blair had money now. So did the rest of the band. But success brought pressure. The music got more professional, more uptight. Blair started fading away. He couldn't stand the endless touring, the bad sound systems, the meaningless hotel rooms. By 1982, he was gone. Petty told the Gainesville Sun that Ron had vanished from their lives long before he quit. We didn't see him socially ever. Back in 1981, MCA tried to raise the price of the next album by $1 from $8.98 to $9.98. They called it superstar pricing. Petty was furious. He said he didn't need the extra dollar, and neither did MCA. He threatened to pull the album or rename it $8.98. A record store in Los Angeles announced a boycott. MCA folded. On May 5, 1981, Hard Promises came out at $8.98. It went platinum. The waiting hit No. 19. On the cover, Petty stood in a record store. Bins behind him all labeled $8.98, but nothing was easy anymore. Petty spent 18 months trying to record Southern accents. He wanted it to be a double album about the American South. He recorded it in his own basement studio, obsessing over every vocal. He tried to sing in a Southern accent, but it came out forced like a cartoon. During one session, after hearing a raw take of Rebels, he snapped. He punched the wall, broke his hand, his fingers were crushed. At Cedars-Sinai Hospital, doctors inserted pins and told him he might never play guitar again. He had to undergo electroshock therapy just to get his hand to close. Dave Stewart and Robbie Robertson helped finish the album, but Petty couldn't hide how much it hurt. The 1985 tour used the Confederate flag as stage decoration. It was tied to the song Rebels, meant to show the mindset of a Southern character. But fans took it differently. They waved flags at concerts. Petty realized too late what he had started. In North Carolina, he stopped the show mid-performance and called himself stupid. Years later, in 2015, he said the flag should never have represented them. It was a downright stupid thing to do. At the same time, cocaine filled the studio. Petty said they had too much time and too many drugs. Stan Lynch called it dancing with the devil. Mike Campbell once snorted something he thought was coke. It shut down his stomach and put him in the hospital. It was the wildest they ever were. In the middle of it all, Petty fired Ron Blair and brought in Howie Epstein on September 1982. 20 years later, Epstein would die from a heroin overdose. That same year, Jane gave birth to their second daughter, Anakim Violet, but she was slipping deeper into addiction. Petty once found her passed out while their baby slept in another room. By 1984, he knew he had to leave, though their divorce didn't become official until 1996. Even after that, she'd still call him late at night, screaming outside his house. Adria said later that being married to someone mentally ill for so long had destroyed her father. And just when things started to calm down, Petty got pulled into controversy again. In 1985, MTV aired the video for Don't Come Around Here No More. Petty, dressed as the Mad Hatter, cut Alice into pieces and served her as cake. Viewers were stunned. Some called it cannibalistic. The outrage helped fuel the PMRC's push for music censorship, but the song became his biggest crossover pop hit, climbing to number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. In April 1988, George Harrison needed a B-side for his single, This Is Love. He was with Jeff Lynne and Roy Orbison in Law, but didn't have his guitar, so they stopped by Tom Petty's house to grab it. That one stop changed everything. Harrison asked Petty to come along. They headed to Dylan's garage studio in Malibu. They recorded one song called Handle with Care, named after a label on a cardboard box. When Harrison took the tape to Warner Bros., the execs told him it was too good for a BSID. He needed a whole album, so the group became a band. Harrison, Petty, Lynne, Orbison, and Dylan. They called themselves the Traveling Wilburys. They found Orbison right before a show at the Celebrity Theater in Anaheim and asked him to join. That night, they They watched him sing his heart out while punching each other in excitement. Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 came out in 1988 and sold over 3 million copies, hitting number 3. The five of them felt like kids again. 1 year later, everything got bigger and messier. On April 24, 1989, Full Moon Fever came out. It reached number 3 and stayed on the charts for a full year. It went quintuple platinum with over 5 million copies sold. Free Fallin' reached number 7. I Won't Back Down hit number 12. Running Down a Dream climbed into the top 30, but it didn't come easy. MCA Records refused to release the album at first. They said it had no hits. The president of MCA, Irving Azoth, resigned soon after. The next team reversed the decision, but inside the band, cracks were forming. Mike Campbell had played almost everything on the album, with Jeff Lynne producing. Stan Lynch felt it was the start of Petty going solo. He was right. Even though they toured together, something had shifted. Petty said the album's success made him feel like a nice guy for about a year, but it also changed the balance. Then Howie Epstein began slipping. In 1991, during the Into the Great Wide Open sessions, they recorded at Studio C and Rumbo Recorders for $600 a day. But Howie couldn't keep it together. He was using heroin, showing up late, disappearing. The band found out he was stealing money from the studio to buy drugs. They had to confront him. It worked for a little while, but nothing held for long. Still, the music came through. Learning to Fly spent 6 straight weeks at number 1 on the mainstream rock tracks chart, tying The Waiting from 1981. The title track's music video starred Johnny Depp. It looked like success, but inside things were unraveling. Between July 1992 and April 1994, Petty poured everything into Wildflowers. He called it the divorce album. Jane was gone by then, but the wounds were fresh. Producer Rick Rubin said Petty didn't want to leave the studio. It was the only place he felt safe. He recorded 26 to 28 songs, but Warner Brothers made him cut it to 15. That decision haunted him. When the album came out in November 1994, it sold 4 million copies by spring 1995. You Don't Know How It Feels, and It's Good to Be King played constantly on MTV. Petty later told Rubin he didn't understand how the album turned out so good. He said he couldn't make another one like it if he tried, but the sadness behind it was real. After the divorce was finalized in 1996, Petty collapsed into heroin. He didn't talk about it publicly. He used quietly, numbing himself. Dana York came into his life and slowly pulled him back. Meanwhile, Traveling Wilburys Volume 3 came out on October 29, 1990. They skipped Volume 2 on purpose just to mess with people, but it wasn't the same. Roy Orbison had died of a heart attack in December 1988. The group recorded Volume 3 as 4 instead of 5. Dylan kept showing up late. Studio time was rushed. The album hit number 11, but it didn't have the soul of the first. Critics noticed the vocal blend wasn't as rich without Orbison. They joked about touring on an aircraft carrier playing Only in the Sun. But it never happened. The group dissolved quietly. Both albums disappeared from print until Rhino Records reissued them in 2007. By then, Harrison had died too. In April 1999, Tom Petty stood on stage singing a song called Room at the Top. He told fans it was about feeling all right. He said he had over $1,000 in the bank, but he didn't sound all right. He sounded broken. The lyrics weren't hopeful. They were tired. The album was called Echo. But it wasn't music echoing through his life. It was everything else. His 22-year marriage had just ended in a bitter divorce. Jane, his first wife, had started calling obsessively, screaming, threatening suicide if he hung up. Sometimes she showed up at night outside his house in Pacific Palisades, yelling until police arrested her. Tom filed a restraining order. Their daughter, Adria, later said Jane was cruel to everyone. Still, the pain never left him. At the same time, his bassist, Howie Epstein, was disappearing into heroin. He barely made it through the Echo tour. By June 2001, Howie was arrested in New Mexico with his girlfriend, Carlin Carter. They had black tar heroin and were driving a stolen Jeep. Tom coaxed him into rehab in Miami. It didn't work. In March 2002, Howie showed up at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, weighing less than 100 pounds. Stan Lynch, one of the original Heartbreakers, said it looked like a little bag of dust had walked in. 2 months later, Tom had his manager fire him. He couldn't do it himself. They never spoke again. On February 23, 2003, Howie died in Santa Fe from heroin overdose complications. He was 47. Tom said it tore his heart out. He said it felt like watching a tree die slowly. And then one day, someone just cuts it down. By then, Tom had been hiding something even darker. Around 1996, right after his divorce, he started using heroin too. He was 50. He called it self-medication. He didn't tell anyone. Not the band, not the fans, not even Dana, the woman who would later become his second wife. He used alone in hotel rooms during the highway companion sessions. He hated himself for it. He kept trying to quit, cold turkey. Again and again he said it was ugly. Dana found out eventually. She made him stop. She saved his life. They got married on June 3, 2001 in Las Vegas. Little Richard officiated, but the secrets didn't stop. In 2008, Tom stood under the blinding lights of Super Bowl Z, playing to 97.5 million people. It was the most watched halftime show ever at that time. He looked strong, confident, and untouchable. But behind that performance were fentanyl patches, oxycodone pills, and unbearable pain. His body was breaking down. Emphysema, knee surgeries, a fractured hip that wouldn't heal. He had trouble breathing, trouble walking. He kept performing anyway. He always did. He said, "Just get me to the stage and I'll be okay." But by 2010, the weight of everything was catching up to him. When he released Mojo, people noticed something different. One track, Running Man's Bible, was about Howie. He said he'd never been able to write about his death until then. He called it embarrassing, not because it was personal, but because it still hurts so much. The years of touring, the grief, the regret, they were all trapped in his body now. By 2014, Tom collapsed on stage with pneumonia. 17 shows were canceled. Doctors told him his lungs were destroyed. He had smoked 2 packs a day for over 40 years. He couldn't do cardio without gasping for air. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. In 2015, during a European tour, Dana found him on the bathroom floor of the Savoy Hotel in London. He'd overdosed again. Heroin 3 days straight. She called the ambulance at 3:47 a.m. They gave him 2 doses of naloxone. That's what saved him. He never told the public. It only came out years later. In therapy, he said he was a coward who ran from pain into needles. He meant it. The pain didn't just come from divorce and drugs. It came from guilt. His mother, Kitty Petty, died from cervical cancer in April 1979. He rushed to Gainesville Memorial Hospital to see her. When he walked in, her bed was covered in articles and clippings about him. She had taped his name to the walls. She was proud. Even though she could barely move, he looked at her and ran out of the room. He never came back. He didn't even go to her funeral. He sent his brother Bruce instead. He called it the most cowardly thing he ever did. And it wasn't just his mom. It was Stan Lynch. They'd played together for 18 years. Tom fired him in 1994 over creative disagreements during Wildflowers. He never made it right. Stan needed patience. Howie needed tough love. He gave neither. He said it out loud near the end. "I failed the people who needed me most." Even Jane, his first wife, never got closure. By 2010, she was institutionalized full-time in California for depression and anxiety. He only visited her twice in 7 years. He couldn't face her. He wrote in his journal that he'd watched 2 women fall apart while he toured and ran. He knew the pattern. He just couldn't break it. In April 2017, Tom began his 40th anniversary tour. It started in Oklahoma City. It ended at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. 53 shows across 3 countries. They sold over 637,000 tickets. Made over $61 million. On stage, he was limping. Off stage, he was being carried in a golf cart. His hip was fractured. He didn't tell anyone. On the night of the last show, September 25, 2017, some fans noticed he looked tired. He smiled anyway. "Just get me to the stage." 1 week later, on October 20, 2017, Tom was found unconscious at his Malibu home. He died that evening. He was 66. The coroner said it was multi-system organ failure from mixed drug toxicity. Fentanyl, oxycodone, temazepam, alprazolam, citalopram, acetyl, F-fentanyl, dyspropion, fentanyl. He had emphysema, knee problems. His hip had fully broken that day. His family believed the pain was unbearable. The medicine was too much. It was supposed to help. It killed him instead. A year later, Dana Adria and his bandmates released An American Treasure. It wasn't about hits. It was about memories, home movies, hidden tracks, lost lyrics. There was a 1982 song called "Keep a Little Soul." and a fragile acoustic recording called For Real. He said, "I did it for me because it was all that rang true." In 2020, Wildflowers and All the Rest came out. The full album, all 25 songs. Tom had always wanted it to be a double album, but the label said no in 1994. Now it was finally complete. In 2021, Finding Wildflowers gave fans alternate versions, rough cuts, the raw process behind the music. It showed how he worked, how he rewrote, how he searched for the right feeling, and he left behind more than music. Johnny Cash recorded I Won't Back Down in 2000, slowing it down, stripping it bare. They had worked together before. They understood each other. Both men had faced demons. Both had stood back up. Tom's death, caused by fentanyl, a drug 30 to 50 times stronger than heroin, sparked warnings across the country. Doctors and clinics began using his story. His family said it was an accident, but maybe it saved someone else. Music.